All right, how's it going, y'all? So just yesterday, Synology had their keynote for 2023 and beyond. And what it is really a overview of where the company is going, what their goals are, what they're looking to expand. It's not so much about specific hardware as it is about future growth and new markets they're looking to get into. And so if you watch the keynote, it's about 50 minutes long. You can tell it's actually really focused specifically on investors rather than future customers for the most part. They make sure to mention how much they're growing, how much their services are being utilized more and more. They even say that over 50% of Fortune 500 companies use a Synology NAS in some capacity. And so they're very clearly trying to make sure that everybody knows they are a key player in the NAS production. And so that's big for two reasons. One, really easy for investors because it's like, hey, this is an up and coming company who's clearly got a lot of money behind them and they're doing very well. But it's also very useful for bigger companies who are like, okay, yes, if these big companies who are billion-dollar companies are relying on a Synology NAS, I can too. And so it's very clearly that. And so they also mention a lot of their future work and places that are going to be very profitable for them. They talked a lot about their hybrid cloud. Synology is very clearly trying to open up in the hybrid cloud space because I think there is a lot of money there and a lot of growth for massive enterprises. I don't think most home users will be using hybrid cloud that much, but for enterprises who have tons of sites around the country and have tons of storage, it's very simple to configure that. And so that is really what they're going for, and you can tell that. But they also talked about DSM 7.2 and a ton of awesome new features that are coming to it that makes me very, very excited. DSM 7.1 really felt like an enterprise upgrade. It was really designed for all the enterprise needs, but now DSM 7.2 is halfway in between that. It is a cleanup phase, if I had to say it. They're adding in a bunch of features that probably have been in the works for a while, and they're just nailing them down. These are a lot of features that people have been asking for a very long time. The biggest one that I've seen in forum posts all over, and I'm really excited for, is going to be full volume encryption. I'm going to get to this later, but everybody's been asking for full volume encryption because shared folder-based encryption kind of sucks on Synology. Full volume encryption is going to be so much easier. So there's a ton of little features like that are coming in DSM 7.2 that I think a lot of people are going to really like as just a really solid update. So this video is going to be structured pretty simply. I've got right here all my notes that I took during it, and we're just going to be going through all the subsections and kind of talking through. I also did reach out to my POC at Synology and got some clarification questions. And so I do have some information here that was not actually part of the keynote. And so if you see some information in here that's like, hey, that was not in the keynote, it's because I actually reached out and said, hey, I really am interested in this, 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 and this. And I got some answers. I didn't get all of them, obviously. I knew I wasn't going to, but I did get a lot of answers. So first off, we're going to start with volume. And volume, I think, has two features that a ton of people are going to use. One feature a ton of people are going to use, and then Worm, write once, read many, is going to be a feature that a very specific group is going to use all the time and be very happy it's finally in here. So write once, read many is a very useful thing in the enterprise when you've got compliance. It is designed to be pretty much impossible to have ransomware against, where as soon as a file is copied to the NAS in the specific folder, it is not going to be able to be modified. There are a bunch of different options you've got here. So you can say, okay, you can modify it for the first 48 hours while it's getting in there. And then after that, it's locked down and not going to be changed. And they also had a really cool feature with this as well, which I don't think I've seen in other implementations of Worm, but that was it's only appendable. And so specifically for log files and things like that, where you're constantly adding new lines to it, you are able to keep editing that file by only adding lines. You just cannot do a delete on it. And so things like that are going to be very useful for enterprises who want to make sure that nobody's touching these important files. And they've actually got two really interesting versions of this. They actually have a version of this that is impossible to modify. They even said that the highest level administrator would not be able to modify these files. And on Linux, I have no idea how you do that. Because in my experience on Linux, if you're able to do sudo su and become the root user, there's nothing that the root user cannot do. But on stage, they said they even have a special clock that is immutable. So this clock is unable to be edited by an administrator, And so that way you can't just modify the time to gain access. You can't say, oh, it's been 6 years when it's only been 6 hours to actually get these files to be unlocked. So that was really interesting, and I'm really interested to see how that's going to work. So that was called the compliance version of Worm, where nobody at all will be able to modify these files until the timer is done. So that is for very specific use cases where it's legal compliance, where you've got to make sure these things don't get changed. The one that I think a lot more people are going to be using who just want a standard Worm is going to be the enterprise version. The enterprise version of Worm is the same as the compliance version, except for the fact that administrators are able to go through a process to unlock files and edit them. And for most people, admins are allowed to edit things as long as there's no massive legal compliance with them. That's why it's called the compliance version versus the enterprise version. Because sometimes, say there was a machine that was just spit out an insane log file. For some reason, spit out a 2 terabyte log file of just junk. You want to be able to edit that. You want to be able to have your administrator go through and say, okay, this is clearly wrong. This was a messed up machine. We're just going to delete the log file because we don't need it and we need that space back. And so that is the enterprise version. Now onto full volume encryption. Full volume encryption is probably the single feature that I've seen most people asking for, other than self-encrypting disks, is full volume encryption. So what full volume encryption is it is encrypting at the actual volume level. Currently on DSM, encrypted shared folders are encrypted at the shared folder level. That means you have to select if you want this folder to be encrypted, this folder not to be encrypted. And it's got issues in a couple of different ways. And so the first, and probably what has been annoying most people about this, is going to be the path limit. So when you encrypt a shared folder, you cannot have a file name in that shared folder that is above 143 characters. Don't quote me on that exact length, it's right around there, but you are limited to how long your file path can be. And that is really, really annoying, because if you're just trying to copy a ton of legacy files in there, you may be somebody who writes out really long file names, and now, boom, you can't even do it. And you might have 5,000 files that you have to change the name of. It is really, really annoying to do one by one by one by one. And so this limitation is gone. Now with full volume encryption, that's no longer an issue. They also quoted a 60% increase in overall throughput of encrypted file shares. I'm really interested in that. I have really not noticed that much of a performance difference. It may be at like the super high upper echelon units, but I've not really noticed much of a performance difference between an encrypted shared folder and a non-encrypted shared folder for NASes with actual dedicated encryption CPUs. So I'm not quite sure where they're getting that from. It might be either at the highest level where you're getting 5,000, 100,000 IOPS, who knows? Or it could also be at the level where there's no encrypted hardware in the actual CPU, which means it has to be done by the CPU manually rather than hardware acceleration. All right, and so now onto the second really annoying thing that this is going to fix, and that is how programs have their own shared folders and kind of have to talk to the encrypted shared folder, and it's kind of odd. So for example, Active Backup for Business, you have to choose when to encrypt it at the very beginning. So when you're setting up the initial task, you have to have it at a special encrypted folder, and it's not really changeable after the fact, and it's very clunky. And so by having volume encryption, boom, all those issues are gone. All folders in the entire volume will just be encrypted, and it's just that easy, which is going to be very nice for a lot of users and is going to make my job with these consulting calls a lot easier, because I'm not going to have to explain all the little limitations. It's just going to be simple. Boom, your entire volume's encrypted. That is that. And finally, the third one is having to make sure that all your volumes get dismounted, and just annoying when you make a shared folder, you have to remember to do all these extra things. When you do full volume encryption, it's really simple. The entire volume's encrypted. There likely will be a bit of performance slowdown for some specific workflows, because now the actual programs that are stored on that volume will also be encrypted. So I'm not sure how much the really small IOPS are affected by encrypted shared folders, specifically on read operations, which a lot of programs do when they're trying to find all the different files. So we may see a bit of a slowdown there, but everybody's been pushing for this, and I think it's going to be a great feature to have. All right, and so those were the two really big features added to the volumes that are going to be absolutely awesome. Next up is scale out. So I'm not sure how this is going to relate, if they're just going to kill off BTRFS petascale, because I do think BTRFS petascale was not doing great. I heard from clients they had pretty poor performance. But these are going to be, as far as I can tell, dedicated scale out servers. And they are going to be using Ceph to cluster together multiple servers to all scale out storage. It only has a maximum of right now of 12 petabytes, which is, believe it or not, actually kind of small. And there will be up to 60 servers that you can combine into one massive file server, essentially. So this will have massive throughput performance. They're claiming up to 60 gigabytes per second. And so there are really two reasons that you scale out a file server. There are a lot of issues with scaling out a file server, specifically performance and configuration and setting everything up like that. So it's not going to be a feature that even just medium-sized businesses will really have any use case for. You really only want to go down this path if you need massive, massive file servers and you've got a ton of users. But there are two real reasons why you actually set it up. One, you have just completely run out of space. You have run out of the feasible amount of space you can stick in a single volume. And so for BTRFS right now, that's 200 terabytes, which is pretty low. For ZFS, which is designed for massive scale out, a lot of people kind of say around 10 petabytes is about where you want to say, I probably don't want to put this all in one chassis. It can go beyond that. It can go way, way, way beyond that. But that's kind of where people say you don't really want to go too much past that. But for a clustered file system, there's really no maximum limit. Right now, the Synology implementation will have a maximum of 12 petabytes, but theoretically, there's pretty much no maximum that you can have as time goes on. So that's the first use case. You've just run out of space, and it's just not feasible to have this much data. The second use case is performance. A scale-out file system, when you've got thousands of clients hitting it, can perform insanely fast if you're using the right workflows. Specifically things like object storage, so like an S3 bucket, anything like that, can have insane performance with a scale-out file server if you've got enough clients, because that is a perfect use case. Now, it does not do as well when you're looking for just a file backend. SMB has pretty horrible performance with a clustered file system. NFS is a lot better, but still not great. So where your bread and butter with a clustered file system really is object storage. And when you've got that much data, there's a good chance it's actually already in object storage, just because object storage works a lot better when you have these massive, massive amounts of data all together. So Synology's implementation will be using Ceph and theoretically can get up to 60 gigabytes per second of overall throughput. I asked and I did not hear if that was using NFS or what figures they were using to get that, but that is screaming fast if you have the workflow for it. It'll have up to 60 servers that can all be clustered together, and the way you expand out is you expand out in nodes of 3. The reason you use 3 for all these things is you want to make sure there's always a quorum, and so you'll notice with things like high availability as well as clustering, 3 is kind of your magic number. You want to always be adding in odd numbers, so that way you don't have a situation where half the servers think one thing and half the servers think another thing, and there's no way to decide. So you start out with clusters of 3, and you expand out in groups of 3 for this. As far as I can tell, this is actually going to be completely dedicated hardware. So I don't believe that even if you buy one of those massive 60 bay units, I don't think that these will actually be able to be used for scale out. I think it's going to be purely dedicated hardware. That's what I understood. And finally, probably the best part about this, and where I think a lot of people will be using it in the enterprise, is for active backup for business and hyper backup. Active backup for business will be able to do global deduplication across all these petabytes, which is absolutely insane. I cannot imagine you're going to get great performance of this for global deduplication. I'm interested to see if at a certain point it just kind of gives up. But this massive deduplication will mean that you can back up an entire enterprise's file server settings and computers and everything to a single place and get insane storage ratios because of that deduplication and compression. Then also hyper backup. Hyper backup is going to be awesome as well because boom, you can back up all of your enterprise's file servers to a single place. And so those are the two big use cases for it. And I think that other than like object storage, if people go that route, is going to be the main use case. I don't think SMB users people who are actually using SMB, the protocol, to get these is going to be the best idea from my experience. All right, and so now on to DSM and Drive. And so we'll start off with Drive. And so this was kind of funny. A lot of people kind of picked up on this. They kind of just stated that macOS on-demand sync for Drive was out. That was kind of what I came out of that. I'm like, I don't think it's out. I didn't think it was out. It's not out yet. It's coming out very soon, but it's not quite out yet. There is a beta for it, and it has been working pretty well. But that will be coming very shortly. That is not a 7.2. That is actually very soon. But 7.2 has an awesome feature called Remote Wipe. So this is going to be really cool for that employee who gets their computer stolen and maybe their login credentials were also stolen. Who knows what happens? Or it's just peace of mind. You can actually do remote wipe. You can say, that computer was stolen. I'm going to wipe the entire Drive file system off of it. I think it's probably only Synology Drive. I hope it can't be used to wipe the entire thing. That is going to be a very useful feature. Also a bit of a scary feature if your NAS gets totally hacked and somebody gets full admin rights. Don't think that would happen, but it's a nice to have just in case one of your employees gets their computer stolen and does not know if they're going to be able to log in or not. They also announced 10 times faster file indexing, which is going to be so nice. I have no idea how they got this. I don't know how you get a 10x improvement unless they found some really unoptimized stuff in their code, but this is a thing that a lot of people have found very annoying, that Synology Drive, the indexing can take forever. So this is going where it would take 10 days down to 1 day. And so that is going to be very nice for a ton of users. And I think it's indexing for both Drive and universal search, which is going to be so nice. Another huge feature coming out is active file locking. That is actually going to work between SMB and Drive. I have no idea how this is going to work. Active file locking is actually kind of hard to do as far as I know, but they're going to have it where if somebody's got a Word document open up in Drive and somebody on the SMB file server tries to open it, it's going to say, no, somebody's already editing this. You can open a read-only copy. And that is going to be so nice to have, especially for the enterprise. Drive is really pushing for enterprise users here, and I think they're getting a lot of traction. They also really talked about how their goal is to expand this out and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and work for larger and larger enterprises. And finally, the last feature that's finally coming in DSM is something that we thought was going to happen this year, but now looks like it's going to happen early next year, SMB multi-channel. SMB multi-channel is a game changer for very specific workflows. It allows you to aggregate 2 or more connections to a file server to actually get 2 or faster times the throughput. And so this is not possible with link aggregation, but it is possible with SMB multi-channel. And I do want to warn you, this is not perfect for every use case. From my experience with macOS, I'm going to do a really deep dive for both macOS and Windows users for SMB multi-channel with Synology. SMB multi-channel is not great for a video editor. Somebody who is having a ton of random IOPS who need to be returned in a specific order, otherwise it kind of lags. When I was doing my testing with SMB multi-channel, I found there's a significant performance decrease when you are trying to scrub through a timeline and do random reads. And so for a video editor or anybody who relies heavily on random IOPS, SMB multi-channel might not be that great for you, and I would not recommend enabling it. But for users who want to be able to copy multiple terabytes of files with a slow connection, this will be a game changer, because when you're copying sequential files, you do get almost twice the throughput for the connections. It is really impressive. It's pretty close to additive. I'd say 80% from my brief testing, and that was only on macOS. I will have some dedicated videos, some dedicated performance numbers when we actually do this for both macOS and Windows machines. All right, now on to backup. So macOS Active Backup for Business is going to be coming out in beta by the end of 2022, and this beta will support both bare metal and file level restoring, which is awesome. They are a little bit late with this coming out. I think a lot of Synology stuff was delayed. I think the pandemic did affect them, but this is finally coming out. It is a feature I'm really excited for because, quite frankly, Time Machine kind of sucks. It was phenomenal, brilliant 15 years ago, but it hasn't changed. It has not changed in all that time. And so now you just get very slow performance compared to what you can get out of Active Backup for Business. So I'm very excited for this coming out. They also have a new thing called Backup Cloud, which is kind of similar to Active Insight, where it aggregates all of your servers together, but it also aggregates in all backup jobs from their cloud services. This is once again talking about how they're really pushing their cloud services, primarily for enterprise users, I believe, because that makes them a lot of money. But Backup Cloud allows you to not only see all your backups, but in the future will also let you configure your backups, which is going to be an awesome feature to have, a single pane of glass configuring everything. Finally, Hyper Backup. Hyper Backup is getting full system backups, which is going to be so nice to have. Currently, Hyper Backup only backs up apps that are supported. And so when you restore Hyper Backup, you're not necessarily restoring everything. This will be a full system backup, which means when you hit restore, you get your same NAS back. You get all your configs back, which I'm really excited for. I'm planning on kind of building out a system where clients are going to be able to back up data to my NAS. I'm going to be planning on having a ton of storage, and I want to be able to have a NAS on hand that if their server goes down, I can mail them out a full copy of their entire backup in a server reconfigured where within 48 hours of a failure, they will get in the mail the next day and boom, their entire file server is back up and running exactly how it was before it fried. And so that is something I've been looking to do just as a downtime limiter. Hyper Backup's also getting immutable backups. I have no idea how this is going to work. They didn't really give any information on it, but it's an awesome feature if they can do it. Essentially, immutable backups would mean you can't delete the backups, you can't modify the backups, you can't break the backups. And so that would be really nice because it's extra protection. All right, and so now finally on to the new security cameras. So this has been something that's been rumored for a very long time that Synology has been working on, and they're finally announcing them here. So Synology is announcing 2 dedicated surveillance station cameras. These are PoE cameras who were completely designed in-house for Synology. And they will work flawlessly, in theory, with Synology Surveillance Station. I asked another question. There will be no license required for these cameras. So these cameras will not have to pay that $50 surveillance station license, which is a pretty obvious thing that they needed to do. They are designed to have extra features within DSM. And I'm really glad they're doing this because one of the big reasons that I have been recommending small businesses and small groups of users use Unify cameras is they just work. There's no config, there's no messing around. You just plug in the network and add it. That's all. But with this, we're going to be having that. Surveillance Station is going to have that exact same feature parity. They're also saying there's going to be a very large lineup of these cameras for all these specific use cases. These are just the newest ones. So they all are also going to have built-in AI with them. At least the 2 that came out have AI. I'm not sure if the entire lineup's going to have it or not, but it is there. And so this gives you a few different features. They've got a lot of people detection, object detection, and even being able to like show little clips of the file over email. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. Even searching through events. They showed where, all right, a package got stolen. Let's see when the package was moved. And so there's a lot of cool stuff like that that is going to be powered by this AI edgewise. They also have a really nice feature, which is edge recording during an outage. So say the NAS goes down, the network goes down, whatever. Well, if the network goes down, it's probably a PoE, so it's also down. But say the NAS goes down for an update or something. Essentially, once the NAS comes back online, the security camera will send its recordings during that time to Surveillance Station, which is a really useful feature to have. And so I'm really excited to get my hands on these things. They're going to be coming in the first half of 2023. We do not have any pricing on them so far. There's 2 versions, essentially a turret and a bullet. They both look to have the exact same actual camera sensor in there, and they're going to be PoE powered or DC powered, IP67 water resistant, 5 megapixels, which I think is a great level. All right, so now down into Active Insight. Active Insight got 2 really cool things. One, ransomware detection. I think this is going to be a phenomenal feature and will be very useful to have. But Active Insight will be able to detect if a NAS is showing signs of ransomware. I don't think a lot of people understand this, but the vast majority of ransomware, where essentially an entire file system gets encrypted, is actually not through the Synology being compromised, at least not for Synology. The vast majority of these times are where users get a virus, and that virus uses the user's credentials or the saved login or whatever to start encrypting the files. And so, Active Insight will be able to detect this, and really interestingly, will actually be able to terminate all connections to the NAS if it detects it. And it will not unlock it until an admin comes in and says, okay, we're good, we've got it figured out. So this could be incredibly valuable for the enterprise because this can be very, very, very bad and can just cause tons of downtime and security risks. I'm not sure if it's going to be able to detect if a lot of files are being pulled off, but the fact that it will be able to lock it down if it starts seeing a lot of encryption and stuff like that, I think is a phenomenal feature. There's also protected files. So the explanation they gave for this were things like HR files, where there's a specific folder on the NAS that is very, very, very sensitive. And HR needs access to it, but nobody else should be seeing it, some personal information. It will do a checksum of all these different files, and if it sees that checksum anywhere else on the file system other than that folder, it will throw a warning and say, hey, this person's got access to these files, they have copied it somewhere else. This is not good, they should not be able to do this. And so that's a really cool feature. I'm worried there's gonna be a lot of false positives just because maybe there's a really basic file in there that is a template or something and they can copy it off. Assuming he tuned this properly, this is great for either a disgruntled employee who's trying to do something they should not, or somebody who's just not following policy. And it's an easy way to administer that if it does work well. Finally, routers. So it's nothing fancy here. There was rumors that there was actually going to be a dedicated router. So not a Wi-Fi router, kind of going for the enterprise where you've got a dedicated physical router. But they're currently just focusing their routers on home and small business users, and that's very clear. They have a new Wi-Fi 6 router, $209 US. It's a little pricey for the smaller one, but it's dual band Wi-Fi 6. Nothing else really big there. They do now have full compatibility essentially across all their routers, and all their Wi-Fi 5 routers are going to stay in the lineup as well. But that's pretty much it. Okay, well that was pretty much the event. Overall, I think that there is a lot of cool stuff going on here, and I think 2023 is showing a lot of good growth by Synology. I think they're going to be adding features where they matter, at least I hope so. There's a lot of specific features like active backup for macOS and SMB multi-channel and Synology Drive on-demand sync for macOS that is going to be really, really, really nice. And so there's a lot of like single features that are going to make DSM 7.2, some of those features are coming before then, but make DSM 7.2 a really nice just feature upgrade for a lot of users. There are so many features on there that they announced that I've seen people in forums, comments, everything saying, I wish I had this. And even clients are like, I wish they could just do this. I'm like, I wish they could too. I can't make that happen though. But now a lot of those things are coming in. Please let me know if there's any other things you'd like me to make a dedicated video on. Certainly once those new IP cameras come out, I'm definitely going to be doing them. But there's a ton more DSM 7.2 features that I think are going to be very nice for users. Also, if there's anything I missed, please put it down in the comments below. And have a good one. Bye.